What's up guys, it's Tom here. Radix have recently broken 1 million transactions per second in a truly decentralized test, with 1,181 nodes spread across 17 countries globally, using every transaction that Bitcoin has ever processed. Nothing in this video is intended as financial advice. Please pause the video now and read the disclaimer in full. I have no financial ties to the project whatsoever. I haven't been paid for this interview, nor have I invested into the project. It's just a truly fascinating project to follow, and that's why I know you're all going to love this interview. There are also clickable time jumps in the description, so if you'd like to jump ahead at any point, please open up the description now and feel free to do so. Without any further ado, let's begin with the interview. I'm joined today by Piers from Radix. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Perfect. Well, we're going to be talking about, obviously, Radix a ton throughout the interview.
Yeah.
But first, let's kick it off by you just introducing yourself to the audience and explaining a bit about your background.
Sure. Hi guys, my name is Piers Ridyard. I'm the CEO of Radix. Before this, I was building DLT technology for insurance companies, and I joined Radix back in 2017, just as the team was starting to scale up. Radix was founded back in 2012, so relatively new to this journey, but super excited to be here.
Okay, and in the elevator pitch fashion, in 30 seconds, what exactly is Radix?
So Radix is a platform, it's a protocol. You can think of it like the internet. It can work for 7.5 billion people and 500 billion devices, but it adds this extra superpower, which is this ability to create and control value. So you want to create digital cash, you want to do land registries, you want to do voting, you want to do massive financial systems, you want to do complicated decentralized finance. All of those things can be built on top of Radix, a general purpose protocol for all of these things.
Okay, and there's some specific things you guys are targeting, but I want to go into that later. The first thing we have to talk about is the ridiculous test you guys did recently.
Yeah, that was really fun.
I'm just going to throw it over to you.
So on the 12th of June, we decided that we wanted to really push the boat out on the technology. We've been saying for a long time, hey, Radix is this incredibly linearly scalable technology, and we wanted to really prove what that meant. So we decided that we would do a test on a publicly verifiable data set. A lot of the tests that you've seen before by these by DLT blockchain companies is they're often in lab environments, they're often on data sets that are specifically built for their project. A lot of the times they don't have signature validation on, a lot of the times they don't have dependency checking on. We're like, we don't want to do that. We want to do like a proper test, as representative as we can, and sort of build from there. So we said, well, Bitcoin has a full transactional history, going back 10 years, 460 million transactions, no, 400 million transactions to 460 million addresses. And we were like, let's rerun that across Radix. Let's replay the transactions as if they were happening, full consensus turned on, full dependency checking turned on, full signature validation turned on, and let's see how quickly we can do it. So it took us an hour to do the entire 10-year history of Bitcoin. You can go on our platform. You can go on radixdlt.com/test. We're running one every week. Our last test, we peaked at 1.2 million transactions per second, which, if you put that in context, that's 500 times more than the daily transactions per second average of Visa, about 4 times more than Alipay on their biggest day of trading, about 4 times more than NASDAQ on their biggest day of trading, and about 2 times that of WeChat and their messaging throughput plus payments. And the reason that sort of matters is because, unlike going, oh, can it do enough for Visa, or can it do enough for this other specific application? That's not the question. This is a protocol that everyone builds on. So everyone shares the throughput. It's not like you get 2,000, you get 2,000, you get 2,000. Everyone shares it. So you have to be able to run all of Visa, PayPal, MasterCard, and then all of the additional new things that people are building at the same time and they have to all run concurrently without there being any bottlenecks. And to do that, you have to be able to do millions of transactions per second and have to be able to deal with all of that data. And this was the first sort of taste of what we can do with Radix.
But when I tell people this, I think the first response from some people who don't necessarily understand the technical side is bullshit. Most people hear something that's just over 1 million transactions per second.
Yeah.
Maintaining decentralization. Yeah. They know the scalability trilemma.
Yeah.
I mean, on the surface, it sounds, you can see where they're coming
trilemma,
from.
Right? The scalability trilemma was never specific, was never generalized to decentralized ledger technology. The scalability trilemma that sort of Vitalik outlined in sort of one of his seminal blog posts early in the sort of Ethereum life cycle was specifically to blockchain. It was like there's a blockchain trilemma to these three things that we're having to balance. He didn't say that this is a DLT trilemma. He didn't say this can never be solved. He just said that this is the problem that blockchain has, just inherent to how the blockchain architecture is. I don't disagree with it when it's applied to blockchain. I just disagree that it is a generalized problem for the industry. And to the people who say bullshit, like you can go and download our test code. You can go and spin up, we spun to do 1.2 million transactions per second. We spun up 1,187 nodes spread across 17 countries. For this test, you need about 30 gigabytes of RAM. It's a bit more than you would normally expect on the Radix network. And the reason that the RAM's bigger is that to do the test in a short space of time, we loaded the transactions into RAM to make sure that it could go through quickly. The other way of doing it is to do more nodes and just to use the API calls, but we didn't do that on this test. So 30 gigabytes of RAM, a 16-core servers with a 256 gigabytes of SSD, and you'll do 1.2 million transactions per second.
Okay, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So scalability, to some extent, ticked off.
Yeah.
There's many other things left, though. I mean, we can have a scalable blockchain, but if you don't have a target market and adoption, it is essentially just a scalable DLT. Had to correct that one.
I get fined every time I say block inside the company because I say it all the time. Dan. Dan.
I was going to say you're the CEO. Surely you're the one finding people.
No, he tells me off every time I say it, so don't worry.
Okay. So you've got that to some extent solved.
Yeah.
But you still have the issue of having a target market and having market adoption.
Yeah.
What's the approach there? So do you guys have a target market in mind, and how are you planning to achieve market adoption within that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like the industry's sort of matured quite a lot over the past decade. Like it started very much from this industry that had this incredible technology but didn't really fully understand the full ramifications for it and how it's going to fit in society and how people are going to use it. And we've sort of matured. And at that same point, we've had people constantly forking versions of DLTs or versions of blockchains because they've been like, oh, I don't have enough scalability. Wax is a great example of that, where they forked the EOS ledger because EOS wasn't scalable enough for them, and like EOS is came out as like we're scalable enough for anything, and Wax was like you're not scalable enough for us, and they forked it. And there's loads of examples of things. Same thing with Ethereum. So we're lucky from the point of view of that there are a lot of high throughput use cases that work very well for DLTs that people are looking for a solution. So when we say, hey, we have this very high throughput generalizable technology that anyone can build on top of, we've got such a wide array of different use cases. We've had countries approach us talking about issuing sovereign currencies on top of Radix, and we've had
any names you could share?
I don't have any names I can share.
I figured.
We've had telecoms companies come to us about sort of looking at their next generation of networks and how they can do sort of billing and transactional services on them. We've had I can talk about this one. We had Volvo come to us via one of their integration partners, Supermoney, who are looking at building an entire clearance and settlement network for their dealership network. So like when Volvo sells these fleets of trucks to their corporate clients, and their corporate clients have truck drivers, and they need these truck drivers to be able to go and pay for things when they're driving in their trucks and suddenly they have a problem with it and they need to go into the nearest Volvo dealership for servicing, and are paying for it on corporate credit cards, and that's costing them loads of money, but they're also not getting the full data. And so they wanted to do this sort of closed loop system where you can do the full clearance and settlement end to end, with truck drivers being able to pay for things in dealerships, including franchise dealerships, and that clearing all the way back to corporate, and being able to do the full chain without needing Visa and MasterCard, which is a great use case. It's a really interesting use case for DLT. But then we've also got IoT companies who are looking at using it for supply chain logistics when you're passing between different supply chain companies, but you need a constant trail, for example, for the temperature of something. So you have this cold chain logistics where you're going through 3 different shippers. How do you make sure that when you get the box, you know that it's always been the right temperature? Well, you need some kind of universal database that everyone's writing to and can read from, that allows people to verify that once they've got it, they're like, okay, can I see that this has definitely always been below 5 degrees or has never been dropped, or whatever the case may be. So it's very difficult to sort of finger point and say this is the particular use case for Radix, for the technology. But what we do try and do is every time we have a use case that we're working with, we then go and put the documentation about that on our knowledge base and say, this is how you implement it in Radix. This is the paradigms that you need to understand to be able to implement this kind of thing. And so that tends to help people start to understand what the implications of this technology are. My favorite recent use case is Elysium, which is building this fan network for football players. So famous football players will have 20, 30, 40, 50 million Twitter followers or Instagram followers. And some fans are incredibly passionate about these players, and they'll be like, and they'll tweet them, they'll retweet them, and they'll like get them new followers and stuff like that, and they want to reward these people. And so they wanted to create this rewards network that means that every time someone does something for their favorite footballer, they can get rewards, and if they earn them, then they can sell them, or they can exchange them for like dinner with their favorite player, or like go watch them in a private training session or something like that. But again, if you've got 50 million followers, you're not going to be using any of the DLTs out there, any of the public ledgers out there, because they just don't get even close to the scalability required for a true mass market application, right? So this is where we get these opportunities. Is there isn't something out there. There is a need. People are like, yes, this is a great technology. It's an amazing set of tools, but there isn't an actual technology that can address that.
That's a lot of use cases.
Yes.
Which footballer would you bring to dinner? Out of all of those.
It's a terrible question for me.
Okay.
Embarrassingly not.
No.
No.
Okay. Well, we talked a lot about security tokens last time.
Yeah.
That's something you're huge on.
Yeah.
You didn't actually bring it up there. So is that something you're strongly looking at?
Yeah. So security tokens is one particular aspect of the market that is sort of both narrow and very deep. Like you've got yes, there is a particular form of asset that falls into the security token bucket. And your use cases can include everything from the generalized abstract concepts like bonds or equity or property or commodities. And then you can go on to sort of things like derivatives and sort of all of the interesting markets that exist within derivatives, your call options, your put options, your futures. And then you've got all the complexities that sit just in the derivatives market. It's $540 billion a year. No, trillion dollars a year.
Yeah.
Thank you. $540 trillion a year just in the derivatives market. So yeah, like we think equities are. We think the securities aspect is incredibly interesting. It's just a lot of people, when you talk about adoption, sort of glaze over a little bit when you talk about securities, unless you're really into securities and you're like, yeah, this is amazing. But the truth of the matter is, for security tokens to succeed, they have to exist within regulatory frameworks. And the regulatory frameworks are getting there, but the people who actually sell these security tokens, who can do so in a regulated fashion, the brokers and the intermediaries that exist there for regulatory reasons. You know, there's a concept of disintermediation. You can't both easily jump to disintermediation and stay regulatory compliant unless you vertically integrate, which you know some people are. T0, for example, recently got a new license that allowed them to, I can't remember what it's called, it's when they can move securities from one exchange to another. There's a transfer agent. They got their transfer agent license. But it's one of those areas that is slightly esoteric. But you know, if you want to discuss security tokens, very happy to do so.
I think we did cover it quite extensively last time.
Yeah.
So I guess where you guys are at the moment, what is necessary from now to the point where you can have customers like Volvo actually be using your system?
Yeah, so we've been in alpha for a year now. We're going to be doing our BetaNet launch in a couple of months. And the BetaNet launch is like the full group of functionalities that are going to be needed for the mainnet, and then mainnet is going to be Q4 of this year. And so between BetaNet launch and Q4, we're going to be announcing more partnerships, we're going to be announcing more people building on top of our platform, and we're also going to be giving more and more tools to the developer community to help them get up and running. Because like one of the things that we really focus on in Radix, and it's not that we don't talk about it much because like so much of the conversation has been scalability, is making this a really nice platform to build on, and really concentrating on the developer experience and the developer tools to make it as easy as possible to build quickly and securely on a DLT, which we think is a sort of really important aspect of this as well. And so all of those tools are going live over the course of the next couple of months as well. So we're really excited about sharing those. And it's really then that people can start testing what it is that they want to go live with, and then go live at the end of the year.
So it's actually not far away.
It's not
I mean,
far
this
away.
is the third interview we've done. And yeah, like, I mean, the first one was just before the start of the year, I think.
Yes.
And it's been some huge progress since then.
Yeah, before the start of the year. Wow. Yeah, it's it's now progressing well. Like there's definitely been stop and start points where we've sort of like thought that we're on the right path regards to certain aspects of the technology, and then we discover that we need to change, for example, how the networking works, so that because when we did hyperscale tests, we were finding that there was a bit too much overhead chatter between the nodes, so we needed to refactor that, and how efficient the core is for doing certain functions. Like these are the things that you get to when you're going beyond R&D code and you're then sort of building for proper deployment. You start doing real big tests and you start trying to break things, and that's when you get the first sort of like taste of whether or not it's going to work properly in the real world. And now we're just coming to the end of that, and it's going to be going into our security audit when we go to BetaNet, and yeah, it's feeling exciting.
Positive.
But at the same time, like this is the starting line, right? Like in some ways, it feels like the finishing line because it's been 7 years for Dan. It's been 2 years for me. And there's a lot of work that's gone into that. So in some ways, you're like, oh, we launch and it's done. But
there's so much more.
It's the start. It's the start. You've invented a new paradigm for the world that is able to work for everyone in the same way that the internet was. But you're right at the start. Like we don't yet know. We think we know. We have some ideas, as in like the industry as a whole has some ideas about what the world might look like in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, in 50 years' time as a result of this technology, but we don't actually know. And what's really fun is going back and in history and looking just what people thought the internet was going to be used for. And some things are dead on right, and other things are completely wrong. A lot of...
Do you have any crazy theories?
Do I have any crazy theories?
Something like social media. I've gone back. I don't know anyone who's really called that, and yet in today's world, that's one of the biggest use cases. Do you have any? You're talking about things which the way we think this is going to play out. Do you have any unpopular opinions about potential use cases that people aren't necessarily talking about?
Yeah, I have a few. One sort of slightly more. So when you look like far into the future, for me, this technology, if you look 50 years ahead, everyone's a technology native in 50 years. Everyone understands technology very well. Everyone has highly sophisticated devices that they have with them. And so the concept of a wallet certainly won't be at all strange. Like that's going to be something that's everyday and so normal that will be integrated into everything that every app that you use, etc. So I don't see that as being. I think that's one of the big sticking points now is use space of people that actually have things installed that allow them to interact with the ledger. There's not that much. The concept of a decentralized autonomous organization was an interesting thought experiment that started, was like sort of revisited by the early Ethereum community. And unfortunately, with things like the DAO hack, it sort of very much fell out of favor, the concept of a decentralized autonomous organization. However, if you really look at it, the concept of a nation is a decentralized autonomous organization. There is no aspect of a nation, including its borders, that can't be adjusted by the people. The leadership can be adjusted by the people. The taxation can be adjusted by the people. How the tax is spent can be adjusted by the people. So all those elements of governance, government, tax, social welfare, what you get from the state, how you contribute to the state, and what your say in the state is, all look like a decentralized autonomous organization writ large. So like my long-term view is that the biggest impact for this technology is not actually in the private sector. The biggest impact for this technology is the public sector. The biggest impact of this technology is going to be things like the concept of nationhood, the concept of rights, and what your right as a citizen is and how that manifests. All of those things I think are going to be represented in digital ways that we will inherently understand how to administer in the future, but right now feel very removed. Like I don't go to a polling booth and get a bit of paper and a pencil and cross out, the candidate that I want. So yeah, I think the state is a long way behind, and that's why it's going to take that long to get to the point where that will be the case.
There's almost too much to dig into there. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole for the interview. There's so many fascinating things. That could be a discussion for an hour in itself.
Right.
So
right.
let's.
But I think this is where for me this is where the most exciting elements are.
I agree. It's how it impacts society. Like the public sector is by far the largest part of society that affects our daily lives.
Right.
And it's not. I mean, it sounds crazy, but the idea that you could have people voting on far more things.
Right.
I mean, people say
direct democracy.
Disintegrating government entirely.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But certainly when you have a process that goes from, we elected people to make decisions for us because we believe in them. If we can start understanding things more easily and having votes that are secure, you can certainly see that transitioning in the future. In theory,
you can. There's always counter arguments, right? Like Switzerland has direct democracy, and it also has one of the highest suicide rates in Europe. So it swings and roundabouts. But like the concept of disintermediation, of at least giving people more ability, giving more people more ability to have their say on things, absolutely.
Yes.
But I think we're already starting to see governments being like, hey, you know, digital currencies. Imagine if a government issued a currency on top of a ledger. What that would do, suddenly banking becomes far more accessible for all of their citizens, especially if it's a poor country, because you don't need a bank really to administer the money. It's digital first. Everyone on a mobile phone can hold value on their phone, but it's backed up by the state directly. It doesn't need a bank intermediary to allow that. And then you can think about, you know, digital rights management like land registries, where right now conveyancing is really complicated and difficult, and selling a house and transferring it and getting loans against it and all that kind of stuff, really difficult, because it's a really anarchic process. You know, the concept of the deed and the legal basis for that is going to be there for a long time yet, but like eventually will be digital and digitized, and all of the sort of stuff that fits around that.
I'm interested because I know you guys have a stablecoin and basically a coin which is backed by a basket of tokens. So you have the RAD coin and the XRD. Now, from an investor's perspective, I mean, I kind of know the answer, but why, from an investor's perspective, would someone invest into a stablecoin?
So the stablecoin isn't being launched until probably 1 to 2 years after the platform goes live. The first token that's going to go live is going to be So we've slightly changed the naming convention, which is good. This is why it's a bit confusing, so I apologize for that. The first thing that's going live is the RAD, but the RAD won't be stable. The RAD is just going to be a fixed supply token. And there's lots of reasons that we decided to go down that route, but one of them was simplicity. It's easy for people to understand. Now, the way that we make it predictable for people to use the platform, which was one of the key things we wanted. If you're a business and you're deciding to use the platform for your business,
you need stability.
You need to work out, you need cost stability, right? If I'm a company and I'm using a piece of public infrastructure or a piece of infrastructure, I don't care if it's public or private or whatever, but if I have to pay for it, I need to reason about the cost of that infrastructure, about what my OPEX is going to be. To do that, on Radix, what we do is we say, all right, let's maintain a price index where we say, right, this is how much it's going to cost you in, let's say, dollar equivalents to use the platform. Let's say it's 1/10 of a cent for every single operation on Ledger. And then what is the RAD trading at? And whatever that conversion is, 1/10 of a cent worth of RADs is what you pay to use the network. And what this does is the RAD may move around in value, but from the point of view of someone who's a business trying to use the ledger, it's always predictable what the cost is.
An interesting question, is there company equity? Because I think there's sometimes some blockchain companies, it's almost like a fight between equity and tokens. Whereas some are truly, like something like Bitcoin, there's no equity in it. Some crypto projects aren't really crypto projects, they just launched a token, but really it's all about their equity. Do you guys have company equity, and how does that operate between the two?
So we've tried to delineate as much as we can between the pot that says this is what the team gets for their contributions to building the platform, and what's necessary for creating an ecosystem that can be self-sustaining long term, right? And from the point of view, and so what we have is we have two entities. We have a foundation, which is a not-for-profit entity. And we've gone, this has got an allocation of tokens, and it's going to be doing things on Ledger to maintain the community, to push forwards adoption, to make sure that Radix is maintained and is secure and is stable and is there for the long run. And then here's what the team get for spending 7 years building this technology, right? And so that entity is an equity company that has tokens. And the reason that we use equity is because it's an easier way of doing things like share options and vesting schedules and stuff like that. Equity is a good instrument and has lots of well-established laws for giving people incentive programs. Tokens much harder to do. getting there, but still much harder to do. And some people don't want to administer tokens, don't want to have tokens. Like, sure, you can have highly technical staff. Plenty of your staff aren't. And like, paying someone a bonus in tokens is not always as great for people who don't understand tokens as people who do understand tokens. So that's why we have the equity instrument, because it just makes it easier for us to say treasury of tokens for the team that have created this thing and create incentives and rewards around that. And that's for profit, right? And then this separate entity is there for the maintenance and long-term security of the platform. And so whilst those two things are aligned right now, one day they might not be, but that doesn't matter because you've delineated the concept of profit seeking for the team and the objectives of the long-term goals of the project.
Okay, good answer. And what should people be looking forward to over the coming, say, 3 months?
So the BetaNet is coming out, so it's going to be a fun summer. And I would encourage anyone to go and play around with it. You can find out about the BetaNet at docs.radixdlt.com. And then we're going to be planning some other tests where we're going to try a few more things. Right? So we started off with scalability. That's fine, but that's not everything. Like, what about massive amounts of double spends? What happens if you pump like massive amounts of double spends in? What happens? So we're going to do some tests around that. What happens if you let anyone spin up a node? So we controlled 1,187 nodes across 17 countries. But what happens if we don't control all of the nodes? What happens if you let anyone spin up a node? So that's going to be possible in the BetaNet, and we'll strongly encourage people, and we'll probably do some tests around that too. And then there's going to be some more information about the Radix economics, about our security white paper. So like how, if you really care about this stuff, here's the maths, and you can go jump into it. And I suppose then it's really just going to be gearing up to our launch in Q4, which is going to be crazy.
Exciting times ahead. Well, there's going to be links in the description to everything Piers just mentioned. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a fascinating conversation as always.